Welcome to the SunDried Tomatoes Podcast. I am your host and creator, Anthony Ozo. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can also find the audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. Please follow, download, and subscribe where applicable. For those listening to the audio version, there is a video version, of course, like I just said, on my SunDried Tomatoes YouTube channel. Please go and subscribe there as well. And check out other shows that I will be featuring sports and brewing and food and music, including my show Random Reactions, which is also on IGTV, where I take a variety of arbitrary stories from the past week and react to them in my own way, including, things like making ketchup and playing Atari games. There'll be a second season coming out later this year as well. You can follow me on Instagram at eclectic_Yotzo. That's ECLECTIC_IOZZO. I will have, updates and teasers and short videos that kind of go with my YouTube account from time to time. Plus, you might be able to get to know me a little better. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. We welcome the brewmaster of Union Corners Brewery in Madison, Wisconsin, my friend and two-time fantasy football league champion, John Puchalski, aka Pooch, for those that know him a little better. I plan to, talk about brewing and Pooch's journey to be the brewmaster at Union Corners. But first, I wanted to talk a little fantasy football a bit with the 2021 NFL draft just happening. And the real mock draft season now beginning. And that's American football for anyone listening in Europe. First of all, I am the commissioner of a very fun competitive league that we do. We call it the Quest for the Green Bowl, named after our amazing trophy. And Pooch knows about that trophy that I actually put together with an old lamp and decorative metal candy cup so that we can drink and celebrate when we win. It's pretty fun. And as you can see, Pooch is bringing over the Green Bowl right now. He didn't win the championship last time, but no one seems to be picking it up lately, especially with the pandemic going on. So, he gets to keep watch of it and make sure that it's all good. But, Pooch and I actually started the league with another friend of ours who's not involved anymore. But, while there have been some revolving team owners, most of the teams are managed by players that have been around several years. So we kind of got some rivalries going, things like that. We started it in 2015 and we'll be going on our 7th year, which is pretty insane to think about. I've made private videos for us in the past, coming up with a theme for the season and creating home and away schedules and things like that. But I actually plan on sharing our 7th season with all of you on my YouTube channel so that you can get into our storied history and learn all about us. And, to be honest, if you play in any fantasy football leagues, you'll probably see some things on my videos and from our league that might help you in your own leagues as well. So, just a fun way to do that. We have player records, of course, and fun weekly awards that we do. And while I sadly have yet to win the coveted Green Bowl, Pooch here has actually won twice. He was our inaugural season champion, and he also won a second time in our 3rd season. He's one of just 4 people to win, a Green Bowl title, and he's tied for the league record with 2 championships with our other league member, Katie Brown, in our history. So without further ado, I bring you the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. John Puchalski. What is going on, Pooch? What's going on with you?
A whole lot today, and thankfully a pretty quiet Tuesday.
So I have to start to talk about the NFL draft here for a bit. I don't know how much you saw. I'm guessing you know about the Jaguar stuff. So, rookies can have a huge impact in fantasy, of course, from some of your draft picks and guys that you've picked up and just got people you've seen in our league, especially later in the season if you stash them correctly. But like myself, you're also a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. So whether or not these first round picks mean anything to fantasy still be seen. But how excited are you for the Trevor Lawrence era?
I mean, I'm sure a lot of those staff were licking their chops when they heard, oh, we got first pick. You obviously got to make a big splash. You got to get the best player for your value. I hope that their pick lines up with whatever strategy they did. I was a huge fan of their defense, so that's what I was hoping for. But I was not doing a lot of research on this particular draft class, so I couldn't tell you what they're really lousy with. But there's a lot of excitement. I got to tell you that much.
Yeah, it's always good. I mean, they've obviously needed a quarterback. I mean, the one year that they made the NFC Championship, I mean, Bortles did okay, but really, that's why they lost to the Patriots. Let's be honest. Like, they probably could have won the Super Bowl with a better quarterback that year.
Yeah, they always had a lot of really hard time keeping their offensive energy in the second half. Had they been able to do that, I think that Patriots game would have gone a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. But listening to different experts talk, analysts and things like that, and reading some articles, the Jaguars apparently did very well in this NFL draft, and I definitely liked a lot of their picks as well, especially some of their late rounders. But sticking to the first round, they also had a second one in a running back. We know how important those guys are in fantasy, but they picked up Travis Etienne, who, I heard from one analyst, this guy could possibly have some Elvin Kamara type speed and elusiveness. That would be pretty awesome to have, but you have to temper expectations for that kind of stuff because you never know who's going to be good. I mean, Kamara wasn't a first round pick and he kind of came out of nowhere at first, but I saw this pick as they're trying to make Lawrence's life easier. They didn't get their offensive line guy. They picked this guy up, like you got that passing back, you check it down, you make some plays. And you make his life easier so that he doesn't have to throw 9 yards if it's 3rd and down. He could check down and maybe that guy can get the first down. But, when you look at guys like that, when you're going into your fantasy draft and getting ready to see if you want running back depth and things like that, would you see a guy like this as I want to get him on my team, or you wait for waivers, later, knowing that people might not draft him? This is one of the guys that might not be on the top running back rankings in the beginning. So,
yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I think Kamara was so successful in the Saints is that they have been working with running backs and had a system to work with a lot of different kinds of running backs. They've had huge amounts of success with Drew Brees. A lot of it really comes down to some of the big news about Urban Meyer, coaching that. So I think a lot of it is going to come down to their play calling and how well do they use those. There's definitely a lot of potential, but if they're using a hammer with a screw, well, you may not have that much success.
Everybody knows in the NFL draft, running backs don't normally go in the first round. It's not like fantasy where the top 5 picks are all running backs. People wait for later rounds. There's all kinds of question marks. Are they going to work? And then it's all about system as well, like your offensive line and things like that. But we had a second running back picked by the Steelers, Najee Harris, an Alabama guy. And obviously the Steelers don't want to throw the ball 60 times. I mean, remember last year, aging Ben Roethlisberger, he was like murdered on half those plays. And they do have a lot of backs on their team with James Conner and those guys. So it's interesting to see where he fits, but everybody considers this guy a 3-down back, breaking tackles, played in some big games at Alabama, winning national championships and things like that. So, when you see a guy like this, his early rankings are RB 15 to 20. So this is a guy that probably will be drafted in the fantasy drafts. I know our league is really weird, so who knows where these guys are drafted, but how do you go into a draft with this? Do you want to snatch this guy right away? Guys like this that could be a workhorse and you could get him in like the middle rounds, or, do you wait and see if he falls to the 10th or 11th round?
I mean, I'm sure that anyone in the draft will tell you there's a lot of gambling. There's been a lot of situations, but especially I know with Alex, she's an expert at picking up the players that everyone else wanted right before they want get them. I mean, when it comes to the Steelers, again, they have a great program. They've had great success. So you got to figure that their scouting and their research is definitely doing some diligence. So, definitely I would think that the Steelers running backs, even as a rookie, the running backs have a pretty short longevity, all things considered. So he, theoretically should be really good coming right out of college. But the one thing it does kind of change is what pick you are in your fantasy league. As always, you want to pick the best player, of value for that pick. And if it's a really good running back, absolutely. But if that's not really in the cards, if you're stuck, picking a running back that's maybe older or on a team that's really struggling, well, maybe it's better to go for that number 2 wide receiver on like championship ready team.
Yeah, absolutely. I could totally see that. One thing to say, Mike Tomlin obviously loves to run the ball, which was weird about last year with how they had to throw it all the time. They really didn't trust Connor because he fumbled it too much. This is a guy that doesn't fumble it a lot. So you think he's got some things going for him, but obviously it does depend on the pick, where you are. And our draft is weird. I think you can maybe comment on this further. Like we'll have kickers going in the 8th, 9th rounds, defenses going early. And it's kind of funny because I've played in a lot of competitive leagues, but I've played in a lot of competitive leagues where everybody knows about, they're following football like all the time. They're making sure they're up to date on the draft and everything like that. I almost find it more challenging in our league because people just kind of, they kind of do what they want to do. They don't follow any kind of plan. I mean, I don't know about you, but there've been times I'm like, oh my God, there's like the third round is over and there's like no quarterbacks left, which is like almost a no in a fantasy draft usually. I mean, how do you deal with that kind of stuff? Because I have trouble sometimes. You can mock draft all you want. I don't think you can prepare for our draft.
Oh yeah. I definitely have gone in there saying, okay, I'm gonna shoot for this quarterback and they're gonna go in this round, and that generally works pretty well. I mean, obviously being based around the Midwest and Wisconsin, a lot of members are serious Packer fans, so you can expect a lot of those players to disappear early, maybe earlier than they would need to. I mean, preparing for it, obviously doing those mock drafts are helpful. I think doing research is really good, but that's one of the things that's really enjoyable about fantasy football. You can do a lot of research, you can do all the things that you can do, but you're always still surprised.
Yeah, and about injuries. You've had a couple of crazy times. So, I do want to, you talked about possibly getting that wide receiver. So I do want to talk about some of these rookie wide receivers because those guys could definitely also help, especially later in the year. One thing that I saw, and I don't know if you noticed this, but in the first round of the draft, a lot of guys were taken where they have experience with the quarterback on the team. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, Tua Tagovailoa and Jalen Waddle, and then Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith. So, I mean, when you see a rookie wideout, if they already have a rapport with the quarterback, is that something that you're thinking about? Because personally, I do think about that because I think that's one of the toughest things. You got to learn the playbook and you got to get a rapport. If you already kind of have a rapport, that's a huge check mark off the list,
Yeah, I mean, rapport with a quarterback, because like obviously a wide receiver isn't really that much without a good quarterback. If you have an absolute trash quarterback, that wide receiver is not going to be doing as well, no matter how good they are, no matter how open they are. If that quarterback doesn't have the vision or the arm or the line isn't there to protect them long enough for that receiver to get to point A to point B, it's not going to do you much good. And conversely, a great quarterback can make a good wide receiver. It's wide receivers they're studs when they're hot, but they need a lot of the team to come around to put them in that position. They're really the ones that finish up that play and really get a lot of that glory. But there's a lot of steps to get there. It's just as important with good chemistry with a good tight end. Look at the combos with Breeze and Graham and Gronk. When you have that good chemistry, you will be good for a very long time. Not that they really have a lot of control over keeping themselves together, but it was a little unorthodox to watch Gronk come out of retirement and, yeah, I'll win another Super Bowl with you. Sure.
Yeah, that was insane. I don't think anyone technically saw that one coming. I mean, I know it's Brady and he had weapons finally, but man, that was a pretty ridiculous Super Bowl. That not many people probably had Mahomes getting chased all around like he did and not doing anything. It was pretty dominant defensively from them.
Yeah, well, and there's a massive gulf of experience difference. I mean, Brady obviously many Super Bowls under his belt. Definitely not the first time he's been there. Mahomes nowhere near as much experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do have to say, you kind of talked about one of the reasons why you liked fantasy football, but from what I recall, you weren't necessarily a huge football fan. You didn't follow it as much before we started getting into fantasy. I mean, what drew you to fantasy football? I know we had a lot of discussions and you maybe saw some things and, saw maybe, me talking about it, getting all excited about things. But, What drew you to fantasy? What keeps you coming back? And why is that sort of important to you following football?
Well, originally I didn't really follow much any sports professionally. I started watching Badger football, partially because, I live in Madison, and here it's a big deal, just like, down in Alabama. It's, very community oriented. Everyone gets really excited about it. It's a lot of fun. And that's what really kind of got me into watching professional or just any football, really. And several of, obviously you and our co-founder, Nick, very interested in professional. So over enough time, I started to get into it, and doing research on that stuff. That definitely was something I enjoyed doing. For instance, as a Warcraft player, there's a whole bunch of research that goes into competitive stuff, and really anything that's quote unquote professional league. There's a whole lot of nuance, a whole lot of research, and you really got to know what you're doing. And fantasy football, in a lot of ways, is really just that extension for football in and of itself. Obviously, there's different kinds of gambling with fantasy, but it's more of a long term where your research and your dedication will definitely pay off. Doing it with your friends and doing it when there's that competitive nature, but all in good fun, that's definitely one of the appeals. One of the things that I've remarked about professional football is that as a lot of the predictions going into the year and what actually happens and what the state of the league is at the end of the year are almost always completely different. It's not like the NBA where beginning of the league, oh yeah, it's going to be the Lakers and the Heat, and surprise, surprise, it's the Lakers and the Heat. Football, a lot more intangibles. It's a lot more difficult to predict, and so that's one of the things that makes it more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, when we were talking about the league, our first attempt kind of fell through late because we couldn't really get people joining it. It's kind of a whole process to run a league too. Anybody could just join a league, but we had to get players to play and then players to return, which I think we've done really good. But it's kind of funny. I actually won 2 titles when the year when we didn't have the league, just random leagues. I haven't won anything since. But I do remember the one time we were both kind of excited and we were upset that we didn't get the league going, so we both joined leagues late. And we saw that crazy Odell Beckham Jr. catch, and we were both like, "Oh, is he available?" And we both looked. I feel like those are the moments when you're just like, "Oh yeah, this is really fun." Because like nobody saw. I mean, we knew Beckham was kind of a beast, but that catch was just. We were like, "This guy's got to be on my team." And obviously, he's been, when he's healthy, has been one of the top fantasy wideouts. But when you look at moments like that, I'm guessing like me, that's kind of what gets you excited, those kind of crazy moments that you never see coming.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was a spectacular play, and it was a real display of athleticism and skill. And it's those kind of moments that really make the sport exciting.
Oh yeah. And we talked about this a little bit, but going through our draft, I think it kind of says the weirdness of our league and how difficult it is to win in our league. Especially since only 4 out of the, you had you and Katie as the 2-time champs, but, and then other random people coming in doing well, but then they didn't do well the next year or didn't do well other years. So it's kind of random. And to be honest, draft pick doesn't really matter because we've had all kinds of people picking, certain positions. I don't think anybody that picked first has ever won a championship. I have to double check that, but that's kind of funny that's happened. But, Mr. 2-time champ, I think the listeners would get to know a lot more. How difficult is our league? I think it's one of the toughest I've ever been in just because of the variables.
Yeah, I think probably the most important thing is in the first to the 5th weeks, maybe even a little further than that, really watching these rookies, seeing how these like backups and stuff, if they really got potential, picking them up, staggering them off the wire is really critical. I mean, yeah, every once in a while your top running backs are going to be studs for the whole year with no injuries, but I mean, that does not happen. I mean, I went in on the Niners last year, and that did not pay off as well. And I held on to him the whole year. He's going to be healthy. He's going to be healthy. Well,
yeah, exactly. And obviously you won the title twice, and I feel like your second title you kind of dominated because Todd Gurley was an absolute maniac that season. And you really, like, he led you in those last games to win the title. He was getting you 40 points a game. Like, he was our Green Bowl MVP that year because he was insane. But your first championship was super close. Our records were all close. You had a lot of injuries you had to deal with. And then you needed like Allen Robinson to have a ridiculous like 75, 90-yard touchdown catch or whatever that was in the championship to win. What was that feeling like when you won? I remember you were like super excited, almost surprised a little bit, that you were even in that position. But I mean, I know you were having fun when you won that title.
Well, yeah, I was at work. I was at Brewing that day. Sundays were always pretty slow, so I was watching the game during that. And I think, that game happened right as I closed. And I think I got the news that Robinson had that catch because I was getting on the bus at the time. And I sat down at my phone, and it's like, Allen Robinson, like 58-yard touchdown. And I was just like, yes! And then I looked up and I was like, hey.
Yeah, no one knows what's going on. You're just cheering.
I had a good day. Hello.
So I do have to say, what was better, winning those titles or getting your first brewmaster bid?
Well, that's a tough one. I would say that considering the brewmaster is probably a bit more of a late game payoff, probably good, but the elation was a little different. Getting to be the brewer was a lot of hard work, so it wasn't like that, awesome moment. It was definitely a hill to climb. Whereas winning the championship is much more of like a shock and, much more of like an elation quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope that I could one day feel that elation of holding that green bowl and drinking a beer from it, But, now that we're on talking about brewing, I think we should talk about some brewing here. Obviously, one of your many specialties, just a little background thrown at from Pooch. He received associates in brewing technology from the Siebel Institute of Technology. He then worked at Brew and Grow in Madison, kind of learning the ins and outs of the Sabco Pilot 15-gallon system. So it was kind of his first foray into like a bigger gallon system because we were home brewing before that. He began to, develop his own recipes and, from the ingredients at his disposal. And one thing I think is awesome is he definitely delved into all the different styles. He made sure he kind of learned all those things. I got to taste a lot of these beers as he was making them. Very good. At Brew and Grow, he also met Eric Peterson, who's the owner of Union Corners, and he loved his beer, and they kind of got together and started coming up with a partnership. And after some the development, the bureaucratic red tape, and construction things you got to deal with, they finally got it going. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was summer 2019, correct?
Yeah, June.
Yeah, it was June 2019, and he became the brewmaster there, and he's been doing that ever since. But for an even deeper dive into Pooch's brewing career, I do think we need to talk about some of the home brewing beginnings, because they are quite comical when you think about it. To be a professional now, and then some of the random stuff that we did when we didn't really know a lot. We were just kind of going into it, learning the system. But you helped me and our mutual friend Max brew a beer at a cabin, like a random cabin in the woods that you didn't even get cell phone service. We were kind of, it was like the setting for a horror movie. But we dubbed our beer the End of the World beer too, because of our love for cosmic horror. But Pooch actually, he was interested in brewing, and we did some crazy things. I mean, do you remember that we were cooling the beer outside? I don't even think we knew about Star San yet, so we weren't really sanitizing. Somehow the beer came out and was good still. I mean, that's one thing we can say. We've never really messed up a beer, even though we weren't doing some of the proper things you're supposed to do. But have you ever thought about some of those ridiculous times and thought like, wow, I've come a long way from where I began?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like a lot of customers at Brew and Grow used to ask me, "Oh, how do you know all this stuff?" And as you talked about, it's a lot of trial and error.
Oh, yeah.
For years we did a lot of that home brewing stuff, and we managed through just fine. But I mean, I'll never forget you almost slipping down the stairs with the full carboy of wort. Like,
Oh, yeah.
there's all kinds of moments where it was like, well, I'm not doing that again.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we thought we were making styles and then we learned, nope, that's not how you make that style. It was still a very good beer, but it was just like, nope, we can't really call it that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that really why working at Brew and Grow was really advantageous, because the Seabowl education was excellent, but they mostly focused on the hardware and tools and stuff that you'd be using. Discussing for them about like how to build recipes is a little more challenging. For one, the intellectual property, but two, like they didn't really seem to want to tell anybody this is how you brew good beer.
Yeah.
There are a lot of different things that don't really fit styles, like the Three Floyds American Wheat. That I think when they came out with that one, it was very difficult for them to fit that in this particular style and win that awards for that beer, but it was still an excellent seller. So I think that hey, throw stuff against the wall, and you never know, it might be really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we were homebrewing, knowing that you were definitely interested and wanted to do this, you got to take the reins with recipes because you wanted to develop some things and learn some things. So I was fine with kind of going along that ride as well. But when you think about home brewing and now doing sort of professional brewing, what do you think are some, obviously there's a lot of differences, but what do you think are some of the main differences in creating recipes? Because you're now creating recipes that everybody's going to love and enjoy, and you're creating recipes that you're trying to make profits off of.
Right. Yeah, I mean, homebrewers have some advantages. For instance, when you are making beer in large quantities, because 5 gallons, that's just a slim six. When we talk about a barrel as a unit of measurement here in the United States, that's 31 gallons. So that's a significant amount more than what most homebrewers are making. And one barrel obviously would not really fly for any commercial bar. You need a lot more beer than that. So when you're scaling up to that level, not everything is a straight line. With alcohol and sugar content, things like that, that's a little easier to get. But like top utilization changes dramatically as you get up there, as well as working with different pieces of hardware might present different problems. So we use electric elements for our system, and putting in, syrups or certain materials like fruit pulp or something might cause issues with that equipment that you previously didn't. So as far as the volume of what you have to use, it's very easy to, I'm going to use real blood oranges. I'm going to peel them all myself. Or same thing with ginger. The first time I used ginger, I was using real ginger. But when you have to shred pounds of ginger by hand, like eventually you're just like, you know what? I think I'm going to look into this extract. Like homebrewers have some advantages with the approaches that they get to use, as well as some of the more exotic tastes. When you only make 5 gallons of beer, it's not hard to make that disappear. But when you make 65 or more gallons at a time, some of your more exotic flavors, they're a lot harder to sell. There are a lot of beers out there that people are more than interested in trying. Say, hey, that's pretty good. But when you look at the beers that actually move, the stuff that people get full 20-ounce mugs of and come back to, a lot of those are much more simple and approachable beers. So usually when I look at brewpub menus, you have your mainstays or flagships, as usually as we call them, and then your more exotic stuff, your seasonal. You don't want as many of those because it's a lot harder to sell, but you still want to turn them over and get rid of them so you can keep new products coming out.
Yeah, that's interesting that you talked about using different fruit things and ginger and how that can mess up your system when you're brewing a bigger batch. I'm going to have a YouTube show coming up called Brewing the Facts. Good pun there, I know, but I'm going to have that coming out in a few months. My next beer I'm going to make is a raspberry jalapeno wheat ale. So of course, in my secondary, I'm going to use halved jalapenos, and I'm going to use a raspberry puree, and those are the types of things I'm guessing that it's difficult to do in a big system. You got to worry about, are you going to ruin the system? And then you got to try to sell that beer. And it's one of those things where it's a niche. I might really love those flavors. I might like a lot of spicy beers. And I think that's part of the homebrew thing. I'm making the beer for myself. Like I'm not trying to sell the beer. So it's a whole nother thing. And then at the same time, I'm kind of getting experimental with it, kind of using a mixture of, British grains and German grains and things like that. I'm using like a midnight wheat grain in there because I wanted to make it darker in color because it's actually, I know that I've been doing beers that kind of equal the character of Doctor Who classic doctors, and this one's the Sixth Doctor, because it's like he's kind of sweet and spicy, and he's kind of got a dark side to him. So I kind of wanted to fit that in there, make it nice. I also love malt forward beers, and I feel like in a malt forward beer, you use a lot of British grains because they really love that. Like a lot of those grains have that kind of maltiness to them. And some German grains and pretty much all European grains, to be honest. But there'll be more to this show too, because I'll be talking about random facts related to beer, but sports, music type stuff, and maybe some history of brewing, in the medieval times and things like that. So it should be fun for everybody to see. Subscribe to my channel and check that out. But when I'm thinking about home brewing, like you said, how difficult it is and the differences when you're trying to make a profit, do you ever still do a little home brewing to kind of mess with recipes, or is that really hard to do when you have a job now, you have to make beers and you definitely don't want to experiment a huge batch and then it's wasted because no one bought it. So, I mean, how do you go into creating new recipes? Do you do a homebrew batch just to check it out?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of breweries will typically use, they call it a pilot system. You mentioned the Sadco pilot system that I worked on at Brew and Grow. A lot of times brewers will use that kind of pilot stuff just to check it out, kind of compare it, and part of the way I set up my facility over there is we have a split system. So if I want to, I can do a half batch, and I'm only working with a smaller amount so that if it's not as popular as I thought it would be, well, it's only a few kegs. It's easy to stash maybe one of those kegs when you go to brewing festivals. You can bring those things with you and, showcase it as something, hey, this is something from the vault that we don't have, and people are more willing to try it, which is, that's the kind of exact customer you want to put in front of that beer. A lot of times when customers, the regulars, are coming in, they're not as interested in trying things because they know what they like, and, when you have so many different beers on tap, people can try them. But people do have their taste. As a bartender, I always say, well, what do you like? What's good? And I'm like, well, good. Tell me a little bit of what you like, because I've got some great hoppy beers. But if you don't like hoppy beers, then you're probably not going to be interested in them.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, when you think about beers, I'm guessing it could be different with this, but what are some of your favorite styles to drink? But then what are some of your favorite styles to brew? Because I'm guessing if you're getting kind of crazy with a beer, that might be one of your, favorites to do because you're kind of doing more. But obviously you have your favorites to drink too. So, tell the audience about that.
Well, I mean, when you're doing, when you're making weird stuff, or when you're a home brewer, you can try a lot of different things. You can run, tests about, for instance, coffee, best way to put in coffee. Should we do a cold brew? Should we put it in the boil? Should we seek it, or steep it in a bag or something like that? You're really encouraged to try a lot of that. But when it's your job, and you're doing it over and over again, you're trying to be efficient with your time. A lot of your, you really try to steer towards like, okay, this is how we do it. These are techniques that we know work, and this is will keep our process more efficient. Hops for me probably was one of the things that have a large amount of technique. Where to put the hops in, how much do you throw them in, or do you keep them in a sack or something like that? There's a lot of discussion nowadays, even amongst professional brewing, about the best ways to use hops. So initially, I stuck to some of those homebrew rules because they had yielded success, but some of those techniques didn't translate as well in the commercial world. And now after brewing however many hoppy batches this technique works and it doesn't require me to babysit this for maybe 2 hours. Whereas in the home brewing world, when you're only dealing with 5 gallons, you can shorten that up because it's not bad. Like cooling your beer, for instance, it takes a lot longer when you are cooling, a huge amount of beer as opposed to a small amount. As far as what I drink, for me, typically that's like sessionable ales. I don't really enjoy like massive alcohol beers. I like a big glass of beer. So I do flop around from a couple of different sessionable styles. But as far as what I drink in my place, usually it's my dark wheat beer. Franziskaner Dunkelweiss was one of the beers that really got me into beer. So I've always been a sucker for a nice dark wheat beer. But I, do enjoy a lot of the sessionable pale ales that are out. I mean, personally, I think hazy IPAs, for the most part, a lot of them really fit into the category of pale ale. And I think that's one of the reasons that they really got that popular, because the IPA craze had faded out and the intensity of its flavor wasn't as broad of appeal as necessarily more sessionable pale ales are. So I usually alternate between one of those two. I do like a good malty beer, so I do have sours on occasion, but for me it's probably more once in a while kind of thing.
Yeah, I gotcha. It's kind of funny when you talked about not liking alcoholic beers. Our friend Max loves like just adding it. Like some of the first beers we made, we put in like 12 pounds of extract, like liquid extract just to make the thing like 10%. Those were like, what's funny is they didn't necessarily have that kind of fusel alcohol taste. I don't know how the hell we did that. I mean, we probably messed up some of the sugar type things, but I'm actually like that now. I don't necessarily like that. It's usually a turnoff for me. And if I'm grading a beer, if it has that kind, like if a beer's 7%, but I don't, feel like it doesn't taste like it's 7%, that's a little different. But a lot of these beers that are like 6.5 to 9%, sometimes have that off flavor that it's, I don't know, it takes away from the grain and the yeast flavors. I feel, it doesn't necessarily work well together, but some people like it, I guess, but I'm definitely not one of those anymore. I prefer this kind of session-y ales as well now. I feel like there's more flavor.
Yeah, well, when you're brewing as a business, the time that beer spends just sitting around not doing anything, not making any money, is also a time to consider. So, higher alcohol beers typically do require a little bit more aging before they're peak ready. Homebrew, obviously, you can wait as long as you like, but especially if you're a big commercial brewery that does canning and packaging like that, you want to flip that stuff as quick as you can. And if you're working with a distributor, it's pretty normal that it'll be at least a month between when that beer leaves that facility and when it actually hits the shelves. So you can kind of cheat a little bit and assume, well, it'll age out in the can just fine. And sometimes that works well, and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, I bet. I do want to get a little bit back to your growth as a brewer as well. Obviously, you took those Siebel classes and then moved to Brew and Grow. How was that transition? And to tell everyone, how challenging was it? At some point you obviously wanted to run your own brewing show. You wanted to get that opportunity, but you had to wait for the right opportunity. You had to wait for something to open up. How challenging was that for you, knowing that you really wanted to do this and it was a big, process that you needed to be patient for?
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think these days it's pretty challenging for any school to try and advise some programs, especially with the tech programs like welding or electricians or whatever. You have a journeyman program, and it's set up to help get you into that industry. There are many, many industries in America. When I went to school, brewing was one of these industries where it was difficult to say how you got in to be a brewer. After I got my Siebel education, I figured that applying to breweries would be a lot easier because obviously breweries get tons of requests from avid homebrewers trying to get in there every day. So I figured, well, I'll get some education that will help me stand out. The problem that I found is that puts you on a level where, yeah, you're kind of expected to get paid a little more because you invested in your education. But at the same time, a lot of the positions that are available at the brewery may not pay that well, or they may say, hey, we can get somebody that can do this job for a lot less money. And as a business, that's, even though like they'd like to invest in you, especially like it's hard to understand understand at that point when, as a business, you might want to be filling this job to clean kegs. You don't necessarily need a degree to be able to do that. And they're also not interested in an employee who is pushing them constantly to get out of that job because they have potential to do that job. So, I mean, it's easy to say, just take whatever job you can get. But, that's probably one piece of advice I had to learn, as a younger guy, is that when you go to interview for places, you should interview them as well to figure out whether it's a right fit, to figure out whether, obviously, I think brewing styles are a little more of an esoteric idea. I think, professional brewing, you can brew whatever, you should be able to brew whatever you need to. But understanding like what their business model, what their branding is, especially if you're going to be a big part of that section, as opposed to like larger breweries where you're just a guy in the trenches, so to speak. It took a while to find a right position, and especially when you're going for a more creative aspect, those jobs aren't as hard to come by or aren't easy to come by. It's easy to get in there to clean kegs and to mop the floors because, honestly, it's one of the reasons I hired my assistant was because he was the best at cleaning, and then I could trust him. If I asked him to clean something, I knew he would do a good job. But that doesn't necessarily take a whole lot of expertise or training. It just takes diligence and hard work. I think one of the advantages of Siebel, and one of the reasons I really enjoyed that program, is because it was a European trade school. It didn't really have a lot of the bells and whistles and some of the spiel that the American Title IV schools tend to put behind their experiences. They're trying to sell you on an experience, the best time of your life or anything. And a lot of the trade schools were a lot more straightforward to the point. We want to get you in and out. We want to get you trained. So they're not there for the same things that the regular schools would be for. So the kind of just the facts definitely appealed because I didn't have to learn a bunch of stuff that really wasn't at all related to brewing.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. One thing we know about school, just for all specialties, they don't necessarily prepare you for, getting a job in your profession and the things that you probably need to continue to learn and continue to do and get skills from. And then it's that catch-22 where, you need experience to get some of these bigger jobs, but in order to get that experience, you already have to have experience.
I'm familiar with that paradox really well. That's one of the nice things about that's changed since when I went to school and now. When I was going to Siebel, there were only a few programs in the United States that were like that. Most other programs, if you wanted to go to school for brewing in America, you had to get a food science degree with a specialty in fermentation, and it was a much more traditional 4-year or more plan. Whereas Siebel offers their associate program for just a year. There's a few breaks in there, but generally the program takes about a year. And nowadays there's a lot more of them out there. I think especially that the brewing industry has blossomed, and honestly, there's just a lot of money in there. A lot of these schools are looking like, oh, well, maybe we should take this seriously. But even UW Madison, was very reluctant to actually have a brewing specialty program because they were already concerned with their image as being the drunkest college in America or whatever. So a lot of attitudes have changed, and I think, I'm sure you'll agree that the American education system needs a few overhauls.
We've had this horrible pandemic, and it's been kind of challenging, especially for businesses. So I do want to go into that for you. How tough has it been for you? You had the shutdowns, and then obviously everyone's trying to get vaccinated now to hopefully open some things up, and they do seem like they are opening up, and perhaps we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. But especially as a brewmaster, you're worried about wasting beers, and I'm guessing it was very difficult during this time. How much do you brew? How much do you put on tap? What to expect? How tough was that for you?
I would say it's a mixed bag. Some things weren't as bad. Some things could have gone better, and then some of that's on us. Some things, seemed really terrible, but actually really weren't that bad. I mean, some of it, like when it comes to your portfolio and your timing and things like that, yeah, generally you do want to serve the freshest beer possible. But fortunately, the shutdown happened in March, and most brewers will tell you that towards the end of the year and the beginning of the year is when you're really prepping for the summer. Summer months typically being when most of your product is consumed. So I had prepared a bunch of our beer, and March was kind of when you're seeing the hump. You're like, all right, I'm ready for the spring. Got stuff ready to go. I should be ready. So when we shut down, it was like, well, all these seasonals that I had planned that I was going to brew, in like maybe a month or two, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to wait and see. Generally, your keg stock is how wherever whether it's serving tanks or kegs or bottles or cans that your beer ends up in, that is the end of the line. So if that's all full, you don't have anywhere to go with your beer. So as long as you keep that steady, then you can kind of gauge your production. You're trying to always stay one step ahead of it. So watching that end of the production will help you know how to react and when you should be doing this, that, and the other thing. I think for us, one of the downsides was that, like a lot of other craft breweries, they are building themselves into a restaurant experience. And unfortunately, that is the one thing that really got hit hardest. Had we been a pizza joint in a brewery, had we had a drive-through, or something like that, that probably would have been night and day difference. Culver's, there was an interview I was watching with the guy from Culver's and a local food fight, their local restaurant group. There's an interview between them and another restaurateur, and Culver's had a 4% increase in sales in 2020, just because their model was better situated for a pandemic environment. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of breweries, including our struggled, is that we had invested so heavily into the dine-in restaurant experience. And we had an advantage because our dining space is largely rectangular. So when it comes to the 6-foot rule and putting tables, where they need to be, it was relatively, straightforward because of, it's a pretty simple space to design around. Not every brewery is like that. Some breweries' dining spaces are Z's or, other weird shapes or oblongs. That definitely made the 6-foot rule a lot more difficult depending on how your place was set up. We had a patio, and frankly, because a lot of the rules that applied during the pandemic didn't at all apply to an outdoor setting. So if you had a patio, obviously during the summer months, that really was, a godsend for the business. And it was pretty common, even I think without the pandemic, you'd have a full patio, so every table out there would be full, and then maybe you have 1 or 2 tables sitting inside, even though you might have the same seating capacity on both sides. So, I think in my experience, at least in Wisconsin, when it's nice outside, people want to sit outside. That's probably the number one that's important to them.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely see that. I was actually going to ask about that. Having that patio had to be really huge during that time to be able to, especially. One of the things, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, I'm guessing it got harder when it got cold, but you did have that summer, and I feel like a lot of places kind of were able to set up something and at least get something out of it. So that's definitely, it's good that you guys were able to kind of keep something going, because I know there's a lot of places that were on the brink of shutting down, especially newer places that open. Around here in Minnesota, there were a couple places that literally just opened, and it ruined them. The pandemic, they didn't have enough, like you said, they had a weird space, they couldn't get enough capacity inside because of that. And then they didn't necessarily have the greatest setup outside because they didn't think they were going to need it in the beginning.
Well, and for us, like the way that our building was separated and how much seating that we had in there, it wasn't too difficult for us to hit the occupancy maximum with just tables. So like a lot of places, not having a bar that you could sit at, or if that was the only seating you had, that was a lot harder to with a bar top, with any bar top. But because we had so many tables, we just kind of said, well, you know what, we can just axe this seating and not use it for the length of it and still have plenty of seats available for people. But it also depends on where your brewery is. I think, we're in Madison. It's probably one of the more liberal places in Wisconsin, or left leaning, or however you want to say it. So people took it very seriously, and it definitely changed customer habits by and large. And I think that probably the breweries that did the best and fared the best are the ones that were agile enough, to look at things a different way and say, you know what, we weren't going to do any canning, but now we kind of gotta. Or we're going to buy a bunch of just plain glass growlers and sell them for cheap. And really encourage people to take beer to go. And I think a lot of breweries, especially a lot of customer bases, are more than happy to bend and change their habits a little. But that's not the same in all places. I definitely encountered quite a few customers, not only at my place, but in other places, that were just upset that things weren't normal and they couldn't get their normal service. And for some customers, that really upset them to the point that they didn't want to continue doing the business, which is a shame, but kind of how it is.
Yeah, and it is nice that we're finally maybe seeing the light at the end of the table here. I myself, by the time everyone listens to this podcast, I'll be fully vaccinated. Oh my God, I've literally been waiting for that for so long. I've been so cooped up. I can't wait to go out to places. I had all these plans. I was going to go to sporting venues, and there's so many breweries around me that I wanted to check out. I actually did a couple on my random reactions, like taste stuff of things I didn't even know exist. Like I kind of knew, but I didn't taste their beers yet. There's a place in New Ulm, Minnesota here, like second oldest family brewery ever. It's like from the 1800s, and they do a lot of like German type style beers. So I was kind of excited to check that place out. And it's just being vaccinated. I'm like, please, like I want to go places again. I want to go to live sports again. I want to hang out with friends and hug people and play board games and be outside, all that good stuff, without, just hanging out, being sociable. I feel like I'm stuck inside this whole time. But, for you guys, you're obviously going to be, maybe opening up a little bit more as it comes. So, I mean, is there anything this summer that customers that go to Union Corners can look forward to? Any new beers maybe you're coming up with, seasonals, things like that, and any events or anything like that people have to look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to events, it's very much a kind of a wait and see attitude right now.
Yeah, I bet.
One of the big festivals around here, La Fête de Marquette, has officially been canceled this year. But then the Waterfront and Orton Park festivals, respectively, they joined forces, and now it's just one festival, and they plan on having theirs. So some organizations are kind of pushing forward, others are being more and more conservative. I know we had talked about doing an anniversary thing for ourselves in June, but we're not entirely sure of what we want to do or what is even possible to do at that point.
Yeah.
A lot of people are getting vaccinated. I had my first shot. I think I got my second one in like a couple weeks here. So I think that makes a really big impact on what people feel comfortable with. I think bars, people can always get food and get it to go. But when it comes to like live venues, for instance, I think that's going to be a really big weather vane. If people feel comfortable going to, the concert where it's packed, nut to butt, elbow to elbow, that's definitely going to be a big test as to whether what we're doing is okay and whether people are healthy enough to do that. As far as beers go, yeah, I've definitely had to be a little more conservative with how many seasonals I can promise. And generally, it makes it more difficult to be able to forecast when a certain beer is going to be able to come out.
Yeah.
I have, let me think here. I do have my Belgian IPA. That one I normally release in the fall, but because of COVID, I kind of had to push it around. I figured, spring, summer is going to be good. I will do another batch. I think it's a beer called Minister's Prime. It was an Earl Grey IPA. It was very well received. But I basically have to wait until that Belgian IPA is all gone so that I'm like, okay, it's going to be ready. Because it was very frustrating to have several of my hoppy beers ready to go and in kegs, but months and months before I could get those in front of customers. And I'm sure you know that hoppy beers definitely have more of a shelf life for their optimum flavor.
Yeah.
Still great beer, but it was always very disappointing. Like, well, if I got this out a couple months before, it would have been better, but not much you can really do about it. So
yeah, I got you.
Keeping that sense of timing is probably, because it's shifted a lot throughout 2020, and will probably continue to shift throughout 2021. And just to know when that you should make that beer to make sure that it gets in front of your customers at its optimum flavor. With lagers and some of these longer term beers, you can be a lot more casual. Like we have a Belgian triple that we've had on for quite a while. We haven't, we decided to put it in cans because it's going to be a while before we can get it on tap. And a beer like that, it doesn't matter how old it is, it's going to be better and better for some.
Yeah.
So yeah, we definitely have some stuff planned. I got some seasonal sours. I think I'm doing mango guava this year.
That sounds good.
I think our new round of barrel aged stuff. So I have a kind of a mezcal goza I did in a tequila barrel, and I'm pulling out. I was going to do a beer de garde for last summer. It's a Belgian lager, a strong lager that typically is at least the high point of summer. But I threw it in the bourbon barrels because I had to find somewhere to put it, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've got some seasonals coming up, and then I'm also splitting it with some of the regular stuff, like making sure we have Oktoberfest. I'll probably do a smaller amount of wheat beer this year than normal, and basically, hopefully things are picking up to an extent that I can go whole hog and put some more seasonals down for the fall and the winter. But at this point, it's kind of like, we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I totally understand that. It's got to be really hard to figure out what's going to go on. I mean, like we said, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel, but at the same time, we're not necessarily getting close to kind of herd immunity vaccination anytime soon, probably. And it's kind of a wait and see. I feel for a lot of people. A lot of people probably are like, it must be too good to be true that we're opening up because of how long this is drawn out, of course, and all of that. But obviously, I'm guessing more people are going to come out this summer, especially those who are vaccinated, because they probably want to get out and do things again. So I'm guessing you're looking forward to that. But when there's a lot of places in Madison to go to. So why should people choose Union Corners? What about Union Corners do you think should get people excited to come and hang out?
I mean, we've got a really nice place to drink. It's a nice patio. It's dog friendly, so it's a really enjoyable spot to come and try a lot of different beers. I think right now I've got 16 on tap, so I try to keep a little something for everybody. Try to keep people's horizons broadening. Try things maybe they're not typically used to. Another reason that it's really great is there's a guy, Kevin Revelinsky. He's a travel guide writer. And he coined this term for the area we are in Madison. He calls it the Bermuda Triangle. Mostly referring to the Atwood, Shanks Corners, and Starkweather area, Stassy area. There are a lot of breweries and a lot of great craft beer bars. So, not only just to come see us, but we encourage people to check out some of the places in the area. Next door, right down the way, One Barrel's over there, Barley Pop, Dexter's. I mean, there are plenty of great craft beer joints, and they're all just a short bike or walk away.
Yeah, like get lost in the Bermuda Triangle, right? That's actually a good point. Sticking together and kind of having a community helps, and I'm guessing that helps with you guys. Is that something you kind of see everybody, all the different breweries and brew pubs and everybody kind of coming together and helping each other out to get business to everybody?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, joining some of these organizations and stuff to help cross promote. But that's one of the nice things about the brewing industry. I feel is that generally, if there's something anybody needs, or if there's a trouble, it's easy to reach out to somebody. If I was ever having problems with a piece of equipment, or I had a vendor that I just wasn't really tired of, I can go to another brewer and say, "Hey, I'm looking for this. Do you have any suggestions?" Or "I'm having trouble with it. Do you have any suggestions?" I mean, I think we had a nitrogen, because we have a mixed gas tap system. We had a nitrogen leak, and get any on the weekend. Just because there aren't many places that do that. So I had to run down the street and my brother was like, yeah, here's backup tank. Go ahead, get it back up. So I would assume that generally speaking that the beer community is like that all over the place. But I know especially in Madison, the networking is very strong. And people are always willing to lend a hand, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, man. So you're living the dream over there, being that brewmaster. It's got to be pretty exciting to be able to kind of do this. And the pandemic's kind of a weird time in there, but I'm guessing you've really enjoyed your time these last couple of years, just being able to kind of run the beer show over there, huh?
Well, yeah, it's a very satisfying job. I mean, some days are very long, and to be honest, you wear a lot of hats. I don't, contrary to say a kitchen environment where typically you need quite a few people to be able to run that in peak times. Brewing's a little different. You're pretty much on your own or with just a few people, and it's a lot of cleaning. A lot of it's just cleaning. But the job is very rewarding. Customers have really expressed their appreciation, especially with a career that's as short as mine is. It'd be one thing if I brewed all over the world and I had decades and decades of experience. I would feel probably a little more like, well, yeah, I'm good at my job. But to get into it, to design your own place as your first job, and for it to be pretty well successful, not many, in my eyes, serious mistakes made. That's always very gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to definitely get back down to Madison again. Hang out, grab some beers. Talk fantasy football. Maybe talk about how my team's beating your team. Maybe I could only dream.
Every once in a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you joining me this month too and talking, about this. Fantasy football is always fun, but just to talk about brewing, I'll definitely want to have you on again, talk about maybe some more technical stuff or things going on. It's always fun, to have someone with some expertise and just kind of shoot the shit about this stuff. It's fun. It's fun stuff. It was definitely a blast getting back to you. We don't always get to do face-to-face stuff like this. I know this is over Zoom. Maybe in the future I'll do a podcast at Union Corners. I don't know. Do some live stuff. You could just bring me out some beers, keep the tab open, but in my opinion, who doesn't want to hear fantasy football advice and brewing advice from a 2-time champion over here, man? Like,
I'll let the listeners decide how good the advice is. I definitely am more successful at brewing than I am in fantasy, I think.
Yeah, anyone in Madison, Wisconsin, or anyone driving through or visiting, I recommend you go to the Union Corners Brewery. Grab some good food and drink some of John Puchalski's famous delicious beers, right? And I'm not just saying that. He knows that I don't just throw out compliments. I tell him if his beers suck. That his beers are really good. I enjoy them a lot. Thanks to everyone who's been listening and supporting the SunDried Tomatoes podcast and YouTube channel. Thanks to everyone who subscribed and downloaded the podcast, and to those who have subscribed to my YouTube channel as well. This wouldn't be possible without all of your support, and I really do appreciate it. And once again, thanks to Pooch for joining me. It was definitely fun, and I will talk to you all later.